I'm a 32-year-old woman, and for most of my life, I've been compared to my cousin Fiona, who's 2 years older than me. We weren't raised under the same roof, but somehow, that didn't stop the comparisons. She had that kind of presence that made people pay attention, loud laugh, big gestures, always with some dramatic story to tell. The kind of person who could make you feel like you were in her shadow without even trying. Or maybe she did try. Honestly, with Fiona, it was hard to tell where the act ended and the scheming began. We never had a real fight, not once. But that didn't mean we got along. It was more like we were circling each other, quietly. I liked things calm and organized. Fiona thrived on chaos as long as she was in charge of it. Family always praised her confidence, her ambition. No one ever seemed to notice how she bent the truth when it suited her, or how people walked away from deals with her a little confused, a little worse off, and never quite able to explain what went wrong. When our grandmother passed away, she left behind a portfolio of properties. Rental homes, some commercial buildings, a couple of mixed-use lots. Everything was legally divided equally between Fiona and me, but the will named Fiona as executor, probably because she lived nearby and had visited Nana more often during the last few years. I didn't question that at first. I should have. Within weeks, Fiona stopped answering my texts. I figured she was overwhelmed. Grief does weird things to people. But then a commercial tenant reached out to me directly. He was confused about some new lease terms, something about a renovation surcharge that hadn't been mentioned before. That's when I started digging. The locks on 3 properties had been changed. Rent payments that used to go into a joint estate account were being rerouted into a different one under Fiona's name. I called our shared property management contact. Turns out she had fired them, replaced them with a company run by one of her old college friends. No one told me. At the next family dinner, Fiona showed up dressed like she was attending a press conference. Full makeup, folders in hand, and acting like she was hosting. At one point over dessert, she laughed and said she'd already moved everything worth keeping into her name. Then she turned to me and said, "Loud enough for everyone to hear, you were too slow. You always are." She went on about how she'd already hired lawyers, tax advisors, and even inspectors to modernize the buildings. She made it sound like she was doing everyone a favor by streamlining things. The truth was, she was making a mess, and she was doing it fast enough that most people wouldn't notice until it was too late. But I noticed. I didn't say anything at the table. I just nodded, smiled, and excused myself early. The next morning, I pulled together everything I had, copies of the original will, Nana's handwritten notes, old lease agreements, bank statements, and emails from tenants. I hired a probate attorney and a forensic accountant. Quietly, I started calling tenants myself. Most didn't even know I was an equal beneficiary. A few were nervous when they talked to me, like they weren't sure if speaking up would get them in trouble. One told me Fiona had warned them not to contact anyone else about the property. Another mentioned being pressured into signing a simplified lease renewal. None of the new contracts had my signature. Then Fiona called me. No greeting, no small talk. Just said, "You're too methodical for this." I already won. I let her talk. I agreed with her. Told her I appreciated her taking the reins. She seemed pleased with herself, like I had finally admitted defeat. That's what she wanted to believe. So I let her. Meanwhile, our legal assistant submitted a request for an official record of Fiona's executor activities. There wasn't one. She hadn't submitted a single required report, and that alone was enough to challenge her role legally. She was treating the estate like it was hers alone, not something we were supposed to manage together. Then the bank called me. Someone had submitted a refinance application for one of the rental homes. The paperwork listed Fiona as the sole heir. My name was nowhere on it. The application included forged documents, fake signatures, backdated forms, all of it. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just overstepping. She was committing fraud, and she wasn't even being careful anymore. It all happened fast after that. Once I saw how far she was willing to go, I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. I stopped hoping she'd come around. She thought she could outpace me by moving fast and talking loud. What she didn't count on was that I'd been watching her the whole time and documenting every step. I didn't need to shout or warn her. I just needed to keep building the case. She thought the race was over, but I was just getting started. The day after the bank called about the forged refinance paperwork, I went straight to their branch and asked to speak with the manager who had flagged it. I brought a copy of my ID and legal documents confirming my right to inquire on behalf of the estate. She already had the file pulled up. Fiona had submitted everything, bank statements, ID, fake signatures, listing herself as the sole heir and executor, despite our co-beneficiary status documented in the original will. My name wasn't on a single page. I handed over the original will, official notarized documents showing we were co-beneficiaries, and a binder of lease records and communication logs. I also brought a printed timeline that showed what had happened from the day Nana passed until now. The manager didn't waste time. She flagged the refinance as potentially fraudulent and sent it to their legal compliance team. The application was frozen the same afternoon. I updated my attorney, and we immediately filed an emergency motion to suspend Fiona's role as executor. The petition listed everything: unauthorized account changes, forged documents, tenant interference, and now the refinance attempt. That filing alone set off the first real wave of consequences. Fiona got wind of it quickly. She started calling around the family, saying I was trying to take over everything for myself. Told them I was bitter, that I was trying to cause trouble because she'd done the hard work while I sat on the sidelines. I didn't respond to any of it directly. Instead, I mailed out copies of Nana's handwritten instructions, the ones she'd written when she first started building the estate. Every note clearly mentioned the two of us. Equal, side by side. One of those letters made it to Aunt June, who had always been firmly on Fiona's side. That same night, she called me in tears. She said Fiona had bragged to her about getting ahead of the paperwork and streamlining the process, even though none of it had been legal. June said she felt sick over it. That call didn't fix everything, but it confirmed I wasn't the only one who had seen what was happening. The next step was addressing the tenants. I drafted a formal notice, had it reviewed by the lawyer, and sent it to every residential and commercial unit. It stated that all management decisions had to be approved jointly, and that any lease changes made by only one of us were not valid. That was when things really exploded. Tenants started reaching out in waves. Some said they'd been charged extra fees for things like special renovations or new maintenance plans. A few said they were threatened with eviction if they didn't pay. One restaurant owner in one of the commercial spaces showed me a signed lease with a clause about premium access to the parking lot. There was no such premium. It was the regular lot. Nothing had changed except the rent going up. While following up on these, I kept hearing the name of the company that had been doing the renovations, BR Services. It wasn't on any of the estate vendor records. Turns out, it was owned by Fiona's boyfriend. He'd been running the jobs, some of them poorly done, others never even completed. Walls were half painted. One tenant said a contractor walked out halfway through installing new windows and never came back. The invoices were padded, the receipts vague, and none of them had gone through the estate's accountant. The forensic accountant put together a breakdown. Almost $40,000 in charges had been paid to BR Services, none of them processed properly, none of them with approvals, and all tied back to Fiona directly. We now had enough evidence for serious legal action. My lawyer suggested we file for a civil injunction that would block Fiona from accessing estate funds or speaking with vendors until the investigation was done. I agreed. But before we sent the paperwork, I scheduled a meeting with Fiona under the pretense of aligning on estate management. She showed up wearing a sharp suit, acting like the CEO of a company she built from scratch. She smiled, brought coffee, and made small talk like we were about to team up. Given how close we were to court action, her casual approach felt jarringly out of place. Then my lawyer walked in. He placed the report on the table, 2 inches thick, filled with records, invoices, forged lease terms, and financial trails. She didn't say a word at first. Then she stood up, called it an ambush, and walked out. That was the last time I saw her face to face. After that, everything went through the lawyers. We issued a subpoena for her bank records. The early reports were exactly what we expected. Rent payments from tenants were rerouted into her personal account. Some of it had been moved again into savings. Some had already been spent. I didn't wait for the court to catch up. I opened a separate trust account under the estate's name, managed by the temporary administrator. Tenants were instructed to send all payments there going forward. The administrator handled collection, repairs, and vendor coordination. Fiona was cut off. The court responded within days. Fiona's executor status was temporarily suspended, pending a full review. They ordered a financial audit of all estate activity since the day Nana passed. They also authorized the administrator to begin undoing the damage, starting with sorting out the tenants and vendors Fiona had misled. That was the first domino. Once it fell, the rest started moving faster than even I expected. The emergency hearing was scheduled less than 2 weeks after Fiona's executor suspension. It was a closed-room session with only the judge, the lawyers, and a small handful of involved parties. Fiona arrived in a bright red blazer with a private attorney who looked more like a showman than a legal professional. He spoke first, loud and full of confidence. My lawyer didn't interrupt. He opened a binder and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of lease agreements with altered dates and forged signatures, emails between Fiona and vendors where she'd agreed to inflated pricing in exchange for referral bonuses. The refinance application was included too, along with her signature listing herself as sole heir. The court clerk collected it all and passed it to the judge. Fiona's lawyer leaned into the good faith defense, said she was just trying to modernize the estate, move quickly, simplify everything, claimed she had done her best but had been overwhelmed. The judge flipped through the documents slowly, asked one question: did they have any signed paperwork granting her sole control of the estate? They didn't. The judge extended her suspension indefinitely and appointed a neutral estate administrator to take over full duties. I was granted limited legal input, meaning I couldn't make final decisions, but the administrator had to include me in all updates, meetings, and approvals. Fiona was officially cut out. Not long after, one of the commercial tenants, who operated a small bakery, leaked parts of the estate situation to a local real estate blog. The blog ran a short but very detailed post about the executorship dispute, listing mismanaged properties, inflated contractor rates, and tenant complaints. Names weren't included, but locals connected the dots quickly. Fiona lost control of the narrative for the first time. She tried to fix it, started emailing tenants directly, asking them to disregard the blog post and offering them vague reassurances that things were being resolved privately. Some ignored her. A few forwarded the emails to the administrator. One included a screenshot of a message where Fiona had asked them not to get lawyers involved if they were thinking of backing out of a recent lease renewal. Then her boyfriend, the one who ran the renovation company, reached out to my lawyer. He offered to reissue corrected invoices if we would agree to drop him from any further claims. My lawyer refused and submitted his email to the administrator as further evidence. The audit now had a direct financial link between Fiona and the inflated contracts. The forensic accountant found something else: a wire transfer from the estate account to a luxury car dealership. Fiona had disguised it as a maintenance vehicle purchase in the expense report. The down payment had gone toward a new Tesla Model Y. The administrator flagged the transaction and added it to the report being sent to the court. Family members who had stayed quiet started backing away from her. A cousin who was supposed to get married that fall rescinded Fiona's RSVP. One of our uncles called me to admit he hadn't known how bad things had gotten. Said Fiona had told him I was trying to sabotage her, and he believed it until he saw the official filings. Around the same time, Fiona sent me a message. It was long, wordy, and full of excuses. Claimed she had panicked. claimed she was only trying to protect the estate from bad tenants, said I was blowing things out of proportion and hurting the family. I didn't respond. I forwarded the message to the attorney and had her number blocked from all estate records. The administrator moved quickly to undo the mess. Lease agreements Fiona had altered were voided. Tenants were contacted directly and offered clarifications on their payment structures. The vendors Fiona had hired, especially the ones with padded invoices, were removed and replaced with licensed contractors approved through legal channels. Within weeks, rent collection stabilized. The trust account worked as intended, with clear oversight, no bounced payments, no last-minute changes. Some tenants dropped off small notes at the office thanking me for stepping in. One sent a gift basket addressed to whoever cleaned this mess up. We didn't post about it. No family group chats, no big speeches. Every action went into a file. I never wrote about it online until everything had been resolved. We documented everything, emails, receipts, texts, messages, and forwarded them to the administrator and probate court. Quiet process. No drama. Fiona had thought she was 2 steps ahead of me, but every lease she forged, every vendor she lied to, every dollar she skimmed created a breadcrumb trail that came right back to me. She had made the mistake of thinking speed and noise could win against silence and patience. One by one, her moves were being unraveled. I didn't have to raise my voice. I just kept going. The court-ordered audit kicked off with full access to everything: bank records, vendor contracts, emails, texts, lease documents. The estate administrator brought in an outside firm to go over 18 months' worth of transactions. Every payment, every agreement, every communication tied to Fiona was examined line by line. One of the first things they found was a fake eviction. Fiona had pushed a tenant out of a small duplex 5 months before her suspension, claimed the lease had expired and the tenant had refused to renew. But the lease on file was fake, typed up on a different template, backdated, and missing the original signature. The administrator reached out to the tenant, reinstated their lease, and offered a reduced rent for the trouble. That move alone sent a clear message: the estate was no longer running under Fiona's rules. Not long after, the administrator caught wind of Fiona trying to arrange a property tour. She had contacted a private investor through a third-party agent and scheduled a viewing of one of Nana's former rentals. The administrator contacted the agent directly, showed proof of her suspended authority, and shut it down. The viewing never happened. Within a week, 2 potential investors Fiona had been working with dropped out. Neither wanted their name tied to an estate under audit and legal investigation. A few days later, a subcontractor came forward with an affidavit. He worked on a roofing job for one of the residential units. Fiona had allegedly pressured him to inflate the invoice by nearly double, with the extra amount paid under the table as a referral fee. His statement went directly into the civil case. It matched other suspicious invoices already flagged by the forensic team. My attorney issued a formal demand letter to Fiona through her lawyer. The letter demanded repayment of nearly $90,000 in estate funds, itemized down to the last dollar. It covered renovation kickbacks, vendor markups, and even a luxury appliance package that had been delivered to her own kitchen. She didn't respond personally. Her attorney filed a counter motion instead, claiming I was hiding funds and requested a freeze on my personal accounts. The judge dismissed it in minutes, calling it baseless. Then came the discovery of a hidden account. The forensic accountant traced several vendor payments to an unfamiliar bank name. After a subpoena, they uncovered a secondary account Fiona had opened under a different business entity. She used it to funnel reimbursements from the estate, disguised as contractor expenses. The balance sat just under $40,000 when it was discovered. That was enough to escalate the case further. The administrator contacted the State Inheritance Oversight Board and filed a formal complaint, listing executor fraud, concealment of financial records, and abuse of fiduciary duty. During that same week, an uncle who had defended Fiona early on finally called. He had believed her when she claimed there was a notarized letter from Nana giving her full control. He admitted now she'd made it up. There was never any such letter. No one had seen it, and no copy existed. While gathering more records for the audit, I went through an old fireproof safe my dad kept in our garage. Inside were a few of Nana's original deeds, including 3 properties where she had listed me as a partial owner before she passed. Co-signed, notarized, filed properly. Those deeds were immediately submitted to the administrator. Because the ownership transfer happened before her death, those properties were reclassified as outside the estate. Fiona had no claim over them anymore. I now had full control. After that, Fiona's lawyer went silent. No new filings, no rebuttals, no interviews. Every message went through official channels. She stopped showing up in person. She didn't send any more emails to tenants or vendors. It was clear she had shifted from offensive to defensive. The administrator used that window to clear out the remaining mess. Several of Fiona's boyfriend's construction crews were still working or squatting on estate properties. Notices were sent. Work was halted. Tools and materials were removed. The administrator filed to have the company blacklisted from further estate business. The cleanup wasn't loud. It didn't make headlines. But it moved fast. Room by room, file by file, property by property, everything Fiona had touched was being undone. Fiona's attorney sent a settlement proposal through email. The offer was simple. Fiona would walk away from the estate and stop interfering, if she could keep one commercial property and avoid any criminal charges. We rejected it the same day. The administrator filed a formal response noting the ongoing fraud investigation and stating that no portion of the estate would be exchanged in return for silence. With Fiona refusing to cooperate, the administrator escalated. The full audit report, along with forensic evidence and financial statements, was sent to the State Attorney General's office. The recommendation included charges for executor misconduct, falsifying records, and intentional misappropriation of estate funds. While the report was being reviewed, new surveillance footage came in. A hardware chain forwarded video clips of Fiona buying thousands of dollars worth of renovation materials using estate checks, then returning most of the items for cash refunds less than 2 days later. The receipts had been submitted as legitimate renovation expenses. The administrator added the footage to the file being built for the fraud unit. Fiona's business accounts were hit next. Her new bank flagged multiple transactions tied to shell companies listed as consultants or material suppliers. Regulators froze the accounts while they reviewed the vendors. One shell company had no employees, no office, and listed a P.O. box as the primary address. Word started to spread in the real estate community. A well-known agent who had been listed on Fiona's promotional materials cut ties publicly. She released a short statement confirming Fiona had misrepresented her legal role and said she would no longer be working with her in any capacity. Other agents quietly followed. As soon as it was clear Fiona no longer had power, contractors began coming forward. Some submitted corrected invoices. Others admitted to being pushed into overbilling and offered repayment options. The administrator negotiated repayment plans where appropriate and began recovering money. Within 3 weeks, the estate had gotten back $65,000, enough to cover the outstanding tenant refunds and legal fees accumulated so far. The administrator ordered fresh appraisals on every property. Independent assessors were brought in. The reports showed that Fiona had been undervaluing the properties by about 25%. Lower values made her skimming less noticeable on paper and harder to detect during casual review. With the updated valuations, the total estate value rose significantly, which changed the structure of several pending distributions. At the same time, the administrator filed a motion to transfer full ownership of the 3 co-signed properties directly to me. Since Nana had legally added me as joint owner years before her death, those properties no longer fell under contested probate. The motion was approved without any objection from Fiona's side. Once the court order came through, I began revising tenant agreements. All leases were updated to reflect legal terms, proper rates, and oversight procedures. Fiona's name was scrubbed from every contract, vendor list, and building record. New signage was ordered. Letters went out to all tenants with updated contact information and payment instructions. A few tenants sent small care packages or handwritten notes. One left a thank you card taped to their front door. Another dropped off cookies at the office. There were no big gestures, just steady, quiet appreciation from people who had been stuck in the middle of Fiona's mess. The Tesla Fiona bought using estate funds didn't last long. Once the financing company was notified of the source of funds, the loan was terminated. The vehicle was repossessed by the dealership and flagged in the fraud report. The administrator kept copies of all related documents for future proceedings. Eventually, Fiona's attorney mailed back a sealed box. Inside were heirlooms she had held onto, photo albums, jewelry, and several letters Nana had written years ago. Most of them were addressed to both of us. The administrator logged the return and notified the court that all known personal items had been recovered. There was no final showdown, no press. I signed the deed transfers in a quiet office, thanked the administrator, and returned to managing the properties. Fiona didn't just lose access, she lost the narrative, the trust, the illusion of being in control. She had taken what wasn't hers with a smile and a speech. I took it back with paperwork and silence. During the final stretch of the audit, the forensic team flagged a major set of transactions tied to Fiona's personal address. Over $40,000 had been pulled from estate accounts and spent on upgrades to her own home, custom kitchen cabinets, new appliances, backyard landscaping, and even a built-in fire pit. The receipts were filed under vague property enhancement codes. The administrator submitted the findings to the court, and a civil suit was filed against Fiona for fraudulent use of estate funds. Her mortgage lender was notified, and after reassessing the updated value of her home, they recalculated her loan balance. The monthly payment jumped significantly. Fiona couldn't keep up. Her attorney requested a delay in court proceedings to buy time, but the judge declined. The home was listed for sale by court order. It went on the market under financial duress, and local agents knew why. The listing didn't sit long, but the closing amount wasn't enough to cover what she owed. Proceeds were seized directly to pay down estate damages. The fallout didn't stop there. The estate administrator issued a formal blacklist notice to every vendor previously tied to Fiona's management. Her boyfriend's company was included. The list was then shared with the state's Business Regulation Board. Within a month, the company's license was flagged for review based on the complaints, audits, and irregular contract activity. Another suit followed, this time a personal civil claim for breach of fiduciary duty. Fiona was named directly. A lien was placed on her remaining assets, including a secondary savings account and the leftover contents of her now closed business entity. Garnishment orders were sent to her employer. She'd been doing part-time work as a real estate consultant for smaller property owners in the area. But once the garnishment hit, her wages were docked before she saw anything. It wasn't much, and the administrator noted it would take years for those payments to make any real dent in what she owed. By then, most of the extended family had gone silent. A few had already blocked her on social media. Others simply stopped returning calls. No public statements, no drama, just distance. She had made herself untouchable, and no one wanted to get caught in the fallout. Once the final audit numbers were confirmed and all fraud documentation submitted, the administrator filed their closing report. With everything stabilized, they formally stepped down. The court reviewed the estate's current condition, then nominated me as the new estate manager. I accepted and was confirmed within the same week. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I hosted a small dinner for the tenants who had stayed through the chaos. Nothing fancy, just good food, quiet music, and an open table. A few tenants brought old photos of the buildings when Nana first purchased them. One woman told a story about Nana showing up with a homemade broom to sweep a parking lot before an inspection. I hadn't heard that one before. Among Nana's original notes had been a request to donate part of the estate's future earnings to a children's literacy foundation. Fiona had ignored it, never budgeted for it, never mentioned it. I submitted the paperwork to honor that request. A check was issued from the trust account and sent directly to the foundation. They added Nana's name to their next donor newsletter. Fiona's business license didn't last. After the evidence from the civil suits and administrator reports were reviewed, the state flagged her credentials. Her consulting profile was marked under review indefinitely. New clients stopped showing up. Her presence in the local real estate scene dropped off completely. One afternoon, I got a message from someone I didn't recognize. It was one of Fiona's old college friends. The message was short. We believed her. I'm sorry. I archived it without reply. No follow-up came. The office Fiona had claimed for herself, the one she used as her personal headquarters, was cleared out by court-ordered. A cleaning crew went in. They found unopened mail, folders stuffed with printed screenshots, and a desk plate that read CEO. Nothing else of value remained. With my legal team, I started restructuring the estate. We set up a dual approval system for future expenses, added an independent auditor on retainer, and updated every vendor agreement with compliance clauses. The goal was simple: make sure nothing like this could ever happen again. The last document came through quietly. A court-stamped order confirming title transfers, full repayment schedules, and formal closure of all financial disputes. It was done. The properties were no longer disputed, the accounts were clean, and the estate was operating under full legal structure. Fiona had claimed it all once, confident, loud, certain she'd won. But the only name on those final papers was mine, and I didn't need a single spotlight to get there. The probate court issued its final ruling. Fiona was permanently stripped of any rights to the estate. Her role as executor was formally recorded as terminated due to misconduct. That entry went into public court records, and a certified copy was sent to all involved financial institutions. The judge entered a personal restitution judgment against her. Fiona owed $187,000 for unauthorized withdrawals, forged contracts, and fake vendor expenses. She had missed multiple court deadlines and ignored earlier discovery requests, so her right to appeal was revoked by default. No more delays, no more bargaining. Her remaining liquid assets, just under $35,000, were seized immediately. The court allowed her access to a capped account for essential living expenses. Everything else was redirected to estate recovery. Garnishment orders remained active on any current or future wages. Her financial standing collapsed. Between foreclosure on her house, garnished consulting income, and state liens on her assets, her credit rating fell below acceptable lending levels. She became ineligible for new loans or business licensing renewals. Meanwhile, her boyfriend's construction company was fully shut down. The state found proof of unlicensed subcontracting, misfiled tax documents, and contract fraud linked to the estate work. His business license was revoked, and he was barred from bidding on public or state-regulated projects going forward. Fiona's consulting license didn't survive either. The State Ethics Board reviewed the records submitted during the estate audit and moved to suspend her license indefinitely. Her listing was removed from all professional registries, and several online reviews began noting her pending legal issues. Then came her last attempt at contact. A handwritten note was dropped off by a former neighbor, asking if we could speak privately, no lawyers, no court, just one final talk. I passed it to my attorney, who issued a formal notice declining all communication. There were no follow-ups after that. By then, all access points to the estate had been secured. Locks changed. New surveillance installed. A secure digital log was created for all tenant entries and maintenance visits. Vendor lists were scrubbed and re-verified. Nothing was left to chance. While sorting through a returned storage box from Fiona's office, I found a bundle of unsent letters from Nana, written in her last year. One of them had a line underlined twice: "You don't need to match noise with noise. Quiet always echoes louder." I added that page to my records. With Fiona out of the picture, the community around the estate began to settle. Leases were renewed without pushback. Inquiries came in steadily. One of the commercial properties, an older brick building, was awarded a small grant from the local preservation board for maintaining historical features during renovations. The administrator had nearly ordered its removal. Fiona had planned to gut it. She didn't show up at any family functions after the ruling. A few relatives admitted later that they had ignored warning signs because Fiona always looked so sure of herself. They stopped defending her after the evidence came out. The estate was officially closed. All taxes cleared, titles transferred, final reports filed. What had once been a mess of disputes and forgeries was now a fully operational trust. I owned 2 commercial buildings, 5 residential units, and the trust account Nana had left for both of us, now mine alone. One morning, I passed the building Fiona used to talk about like it was already hers. She once bragged that she'd take it over soon. I stood in front of it, key in hand. Her voice was gone. Her threats didn't matter. She talked herself into a fall she couldn't recover from. I never had to say a word.